Oh, I was born in Powell, Wyoming, January 6th, 1918. Park County, where you could look up and a few miles away you could see the Tetons. That's been almost 100 years ago. I'm supposed to remember that? That is interesting because the only thing I remember about Powell is we moved to Canada, and then from Canada in 1923 we came into Montana. And the only thing I remember about Powell is when I was growing up, my grandmother lived there, and we went down for a few days every summer to visit Grandma. And it didn't look like that. That was Powell, huh? Where did you find a picture like that? Interesting. Huh. Amazing. Oh, there's Dad, when he had hair. That's me, yeah. Oh, that I can remember my father. I never knew him with hair like that, but that's when he was holding me out in the field in Wyoming. And that's Grandma's house. I remember Grandma's house because we went down. It eventually burned, you know. But we used to go down every summer, like I said, because Leona May was my cousin. There was only two kids, Mom and Uncle Harry. And Uncle Harry stayed in Powell, and Mom went, of course, to Canada with Dad and then visit Grandma. And that was the house on the farm. Yeah, that's Mom and I. And that was my grandmother. I remember her. Of course, I don't remember her from that one, but in later years, I remember her. They must have had very good luck because they had the land there, Dad and the Kleins and the Grays. I'm trying to think of who else names I remember. And this land agent came through and sold them on going to Canada, to Alberta. Wonderful farming country up there. And so they sold everything. They all had new homes and everything. And I suppose in those days it only cost $400 or $500 to build a whole new house, you know. And they sold everything. How many families did they say there was? I think they said there was 11. And went to Canada to farm, went to Alberta, up above Cardston, between a little town called Lethbridge. That's where Al was born. And in 3 years, no rain, no moisture, everything was dry land, and they were broke and coming back with, and the folks got across the border in Montana, and Dad stopped there. I don't know why they stopped right there, but they did. And oh dear, there's Al and I in the old Model T. The only time I remember one of the old touring cars like that, I was older, and we had gone from, it was when we lived in Fairfield, and we'd gone down to visit Grandma. It was raining. Gone down, it's 300, it was just on the other side of Yellowstone. It was about 350 miles from where we lived into the little town of Powell. And they had one of these old cars, and I remember the touring car because it had the windows with the isinglass, and we tried to see out those little things because it was raining, and they had canvas window things that some way, you know, they didn't have the kind glass windows that rolled up or anything. They just had some kind of canvas things that dropped down. But there's Al, and there's me. Oh dear. The only stories I ever heard about it was he sold them on going up there because it would be so good to raise grain up there. Alberta was wide open, and they could get land cheap. They had enough money to go all of them go up there and build new homes. And they had one picture of Al and I out by a house that was a new home there, and in 3 years they were all broke and coming back. There we are. There's Grandma. There's me. There's my favorite Aunt Bertie, Dad's sister. That woman's name was Bessie Gray. This one, and this is Irma, my cousin, and that's Grandma. And I suppose that's Merle up there. And there's Mom. See her nose sticking out from behind Grandma? This has got to be around Fairfield, yeah, but I don't know. It could be around or close to Uncle Louis. When they came back from Canada, everybody was broke except her husband, Uncle Louis. He came from a family called Baldwin in Illinois, and they had money. So he didn't have to worry. He went in and got a choice piece of land, and it already had a house on it, and everybody else was broke, but Uncle Louis always had a little extra money because he was a Baldwin, and they came from Illinois, and I don't have anything about the Baldwins. If they ever traced any of that history or anything, I don't know. There were just the two of them when they were little kids, and of course their dad, they were 5 and 6 years old when my grandfather Meyer took off for the gold rush and never came back. He just abandoned the family in Illinois, and she had to raise them, and then she married again. She married a man, Grandpa Baker, a lot older than her. A Civil War veteran, very, very kind man. Dad said he taught them how to do everything. He wasn't strong enough to do it, but he would tell them and show them, and they would do it on the farm and stuff. And he made her independently wealthy during the Depression because she had a Civil War pension check for $15 a month. And during the Depression, $15 a month was, whoa, a lot of money. And we knew when Grandma was going to get about the time, and then she'd always say to me, "Now, sister, here's 25 cents. You can go into town and you can get several yards of material, and you can make Robert," she called him, Robert, some rompers. Jerry Robert had more rompers than any kid in the valley. Yeah, best dressed kid in town. We didn't have anything else, but Robert had rompers. 1923, we crossed the border from Canada into Montana on the train, got off at a little town called POWELL. I think one of the old elevators is still there. It was years ago, I don't know. And Dad was there to meet us in a sled with a driver. Dad's feet, and look a little further, we could see the rump of the horses. Of course, to us, the horses were all we knew. Oh, I hate horses. Anyway, covered us up with canvas and took us home to the Bob Johnson place, our new home, a great big old cold, miserable house. They were broke, and us two kids, noisy kids. And we got to this great big old barn of a place, and this was it. Great big Bob Johnson place, and it was across the street from Colsta's. The nicest people in the world. There isn't a race of people that's any sweeter, kinder than the Norwegians. Oh, they took us in, and they were so good to us. Best neighbors. And then the next year, they all had smallpox. Except me, I didn't get them. I had a natural immunity to them, and that looks like us. Oh, lovely kids. That had to be in Montana just after we got back. I don't think Al was old enough to be, we had to be about, 5 and 6 there? Funny we weren't fighting. We were always fighting over something. He had ringlets. His hair was absolutely gorgeous. He had those dark, dark curls that I always wanted. He had Bruce's hair, just all ringlets. Is that a dog? Is that Buster under there? Looks like it. We had a pup, and he rode the hood of Dad's car for years. When they built Gibson Dam and opened the Greenfield irrigation project, why, they had water. What year was that? It had to be, let's see, when I was 10, one of my best friends drowned up at the dam, at the Gibson Dam. We went up there for a picnic with the church, and everybody was swimming, and she got caught in a current. And Sanford dove in and tried to get her, but and in those days they didn't know about respiration and all that stuff. I don't know what they did, but they couldn't save her. She was 10, so that would have been in 28. I know all we little girls the reason we remembered so vividly that all we little girls, her name was Helen Mazingo, and her dad ran the pool hall and that in Fairfield. And all we little girls were dressed in white, and we were the honorary pallbearers. Now that'll stick on a kid's, in a kid's mind. Yep, all of us. There was a whole row of us all dressed in white. The little church there in Fairfield. We came from Canada in 1923, and that winter, the next winter, 23 and 24, just for Roy was born, they got the smallpox at Christmas time because Aunt Bertie, they were so afraid of them. Aunt Bertie and them brought all our Christmas gifts and left them outside in the snow. And then I'd have to go out and drag them in because I was the only one that didn't get them. The Colsters would milk the cow and leave it on they had a cement well casing there where they put the ropes on the water. Faultine would set the milk on there for me and leave. And then I'd go out, a little kid, 6 years old, and drag that bucket of milk in from Bobby the cow, or whatever her name was. We called all our cows Bobby. And Mom's feet were so bad, and she was pregnant with Roy, and try to help me strain that milk. Oh, geez, that's about all I remember, except how terribly sick she was. And they had no money. Of course, I didn't realize that, just a kid. All I knew was I had to get the milk in and then turn around and drag the pot out. They didn't have toilets or anything in the house. Everything was outside, and the folks couldn't go out. So they had what they called a chamber by the outside door, and they'd use that, put the lid back on, and then I'd drag that clear out through the snow and that way out somewhere and dump it. 6 years old. And the Colsters, nobody'd get near you to help you. They're scared to death of smallpox. And the reason we got it was one of the guys, Matkin, went to California to visit. He was one of the rich farmers up there, and he came back, and he didn't tell him that he had been exposed to smallpox because there wasn't much they could have done it in those days anyway. The only place we were lucky is Dr. Charles Bateman was our doctor. He'd served in World War I, and he'd had smallpox. He'd served with the troops, and he would come down once a week and check the folks. Oh, it's so terrible because Mom was pregnant with Roy. She couldn't eat. They lived on green tea. Little did they know, nowadays they know how good tea is with all its antioxidants and stuff in it. Those days they just knew that they had tea and they could dunk their toast in there and just get that food down their throats. And he was a good-looking man, white-haired and very brusque. And he'd say to me, "Come here." Oh, I was scared to death of him in those days. "I got to look at you. You've got to have him." And he found one spot on an eyelid and one spot on a hip. He'd just look at the folks and say, "She's not going to get him. She's immune to him. Don't ask me why." I never got him. And then when Roy was born, he had 3 little smallpox on his wrist. And so he was born immune to him. He already had him while Mom was carrying him. So that's my cousin, and that's me, and that's Al, and that's Abanan, and that's Roy D. The Fultons only had, Uncle Harry and Aunt Lola only had 3 kids. One my age, her, and then 5 years later they had a little boy. He's still alive. Alan Fulton. Alan's still alive. I think they live in Denver. I haven't seen him for Roy. He goes to see Roy. East of town, there was only 11 students, and then there was 13. The first year, Miss Jones was our teacher, and she'd had polio. She had a brace on her leg, and she couldn't handle the kids. Those big boys I was just a little girl, 6 years old, and the Austins lived across the street, farmers, big boys, and they'd stick me up on the back of the woodshed because you heated the room with pot-bellied stoves, and the wood was out there, and I'd sit there and squall. And Miss Jones couldn't get me down because she had a brace on her leg. Well, that lasted 1 year, and they knew they had to get somebody, so they brought in a Norwegian woman named Laura Swenson, and that was the last time the Austin boys ever caused any trouble. She had thought nothing of using a switch. Whoa. She settled that school down. It was a one-room schoolhouse for 3 years, and then they consolidated. We got school buses. The Radcliffe boys drove the buses, and when I started 4th grade, we started in Fairfield. It's that square building in the middle of Fairfield. I suppose it's still there. I don't know. I've been back for so long. And we had, how many grades? 4 grades in each room, something like that. I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, sounds right. Get up in the morning and wash your face and brush your teeth and watch for the bus. Oh, I remember that one. There's Betty and Nella and Eileen and me and Evelyn. And that's the farm. See the old windmill? That's the old Thord place that the folks bought where they built the new house. I'll tell you what it was. Betty was born in 1926. Roy was born in 24. Betty was born in 1926. And how old would she be there? 2? So it's somewhere around 27 or 28, see? And that's Evelyn and me and Eileen and Nilla. And this girl here is sister to her. Those are the two Gories. And this was a Healy and that was me. And her dad was the one, had one of the elevators in town, and along in, I don't know what year, but they suddenly left. He came up short on some of the weights and measures of the grains or something. Never did know what the scandal was. I wasn't old enough to pay much attention, but the Healys left. And Mom said it was so funny. They bought, Dad made all his money on the ditchers. They had that place down at Apache Junction. And they loved to play golf. They liked to get there. Mom loved to play golf. So they'd get there around the 1st of October every year. They'd leave Montana and go down there. And she said they had a big meeting one day, and some woman come up and said to me, said to her, "You know who I am?" She said, "I'm Healy anyway." And Mom looked at her and she said, "Oh, Ruth Healy, yeah." She said, "Oh, hi." Mom said I was very cold because I knew that what they'd done to us in Fairfield. I said, "Well, Mom, you can't judge a book by its cover. Poor little woman probably suffered from that too. It wasn't her, it was her husband." She said, "I know." But that was Eileen. Oh, the only radio program, I don't have any idea. It was all Western. Would all have been country Western. That's all. The ball games we listened to were the St. Louis Cardinals, because that's the only team west. We love baseball. And Mr. Moses brought us up on baseball, taught us all the plays and everything, because he was from St. Louis. And that's, we had the radio to listen to. For the first year or two, Dad would have to bring the car battery in and hook the old radio up to give it juice to run it so we could listen, so Mr. Moses could listen to the ball games in the afternoon from St. Louis on the radio. Oh, we had a Victrola. Sure, everybody had Victrolas. And then I can remember when the first radios come out, and ours was a little Philco, shaped like this. Because we'd sit in front of it. Everybody'd sit in front of their little Philco-shaped radios. I was, the day the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor, I was listening to a little tiny radio on Sunday morning because I was sick to my stomach. I was pregnant with Bruce, and I hadn't gone to church. So Jerry'd taken the two older kids and gone to church, and I'm standing there on the counter, and Roosevelt announces that Pearl Harbor's been bombed. And that was about 11 o'clock in the morning, see? And at 7 o'clock that morning, Pacific time, whatever it was, Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And Jerry walked in and with the kids, and I said, "The Japs bombed Pearl Harbor." And he said, "What are you talking about? We didn't know what Pearl Harbor was. I mean, we didn't pay any attention to it." I said, "It was just on the news, on the radio." Well, we knew. I mean, oh boy, we went to war and they rationed stuff. We got sheets of paper. Oh, why didn't we save some of those? We could have so much sugar every month. Oh, we were lucky, we were farmers. And then, of course, all we did for everybody was ration on gas. You couldn't travel. But we'd take our car out to Dad's. On the farm, they had those great big 55-gallon drums of gas laying on the side with the spigots to fill the tractors. And boy, they weren't rationed farm product, So we just take the old chivvy up and pull it up and fill it out at the farm. And I don't know how long it would run. Great Falls was 40 miles away, but I think we'd go out once a week and fill the tank, so must have got good mileage. We weren't much for music, and I don't know why. We all had piano lessons. Oh, if I'd have just practiced more with Miss Bell that came out from Great Falls once a week to give us piano lessons. No, the crops and the farm came first. The only time Dad, he'd take Sundays off, unless they were watering the hay or putting the hay up or some. The crops came first, and then all winter long. Dad didn't go to church. He went 3 times a year. Christmas and Easter, and we used to laugh because that Dad went to church 3 times a year. He just didn't believe in that stuff. I mean, he was, for 3 times a year anyway, that you'd see his face in church. But everybody took up a donation to maintain a minister from the church. It was like, what, $20 a month everybody paid, or whatever it was, to keep the house up in Fairfield. And then they have to have a living wage, and whatever that was in those days, everybody donated. I remember It would like, we pay tithing to the church and stuff like that. Sears catalog. Oh, how we love Sears. We'd take the Sears and look at the new dress patterns and stuff. Mom would help us and get the newspapers out and cut patterns out from watching Sears to make dresses and stuff. That's all we got. They didn't have any other catalogs that I can remember. Montgomery Ward, later years, but I think Sears was the first one. We lived with the Sears catalog. The Saturday Evening Post came every Thursday, and Al and I raced that whole mile down to the mailbox and back to get it so Mom could read to us, because there were stories in the Post. There was a guy by the name of Earl Derbiggers, and he wrote the Charlie Chan series about Charlie Chan was a detective. And then there was Miss Pinkerton. Mary Roberts Reinhardt wrote about Miss Pinkerton, the nurse, and she was a detective. And they came out in serial form. You'd get so much a week. And then the next week, another installment. So Mom had gone to college in Billings, and when she did, she took elocution lessons, and oh, she could read. So every Thursday night after the paper came and Dad had polished the apples, Mom would read us another chapter of either Charlie Chan or Miss Pinkerton or one of them. And that was the big treat for us every Thursday night. Polished apples and whatever was in the Saturday Evening Post, whatever came that week. Dad had a root cellar that you could back the truck right into, and on each side were bins of solid sand. Oh, probably 3 on each side. One was full of carrots and vegetables and beets and all that stuff. One was full of potatoes. One was full of apples. Because it froze. Everything froze in Montana all the time. You've been up there. You know how cold it gets. And that was the way they didn't have refrigeration and stuff like that. So you just back the little truck back in and have all these bins. And here was all your carrots and beets and potatoes and whatever you wanted. You just go to the root cellar and get it during the winter, you know. And then they had huge boilers. Oh, they'd have to boil those quarts of beef. How many did a boiler hold? 13 quarts or whatever it was. And they'd have to boil. They didn't have pressure cookers. And they'd cover them with water and seal them and just leave enough air. You'd turn that cur lid this way and then half a turn back to give it that little air so the jars didn't break. And they boiled that beef in there, or vegetables. Peas were the ones they were afraid of. Peas, if you didn't get peas just right, they were deadly. They didn't know in those days what it was, but Dad didn't like peas anyway, and so Mom didn't bother with anything but, I think it was string beans. Corn was deadly. If you got that little bit of, open that cupboard and take out a quart of corn, a little cloudy in it, nope, can't even feed it the chickens. It'd have whatever the poisoning was. We used to call it ptomaine poisoning, but I don't know what it was. Oh, my birthday party, my 10th birthday party. My, oh my, oh my. Oh yeah, Roy and Betty and Nella Gorey and Eileen Healy and Beverly Gurney and Georgia Vanderhoof and I know Frances Olson's in there. There's Alice Eastwood. Frances Olson's up by Georgia. Georgia went to work at the Library of Congress and died of a brain tumor. They ever knew how she got it. Mom had everybody come out, and there was our teacher, Miss Helgeson. That's about all I know. Look how Roy and Betty were such little kids. That was my best friend next to me, Nella Gorey. I had a crush on her brother. Oh. That's the way they used to wash the clothes, except Mom. Dad put up a big old, he built a little shed next to the old house on the farm, and they bought wooden tubs, great big wooden tubs. They heated the water in a boiler on the stove, copper boiler, and put it in the washing machine out in the shed, and he had fixed up belts and levees and a little glass motor with belts that ran the agitator, so she didn't have to wash like that. And then, but of course, we had to wring them by hand into the first rinse water, and because in those days you only had one water, you washed the whites first. They went through the first, and you wring them through, and then the next one, the towels, the light clothes, and then the men's dirty old farm clothes, those were last. And you can imagine that water was soupy by the time. That's the way it was back in those days. And Mom was lucky. She was the only farmer's wife that had any kind of a washing machine like that. Dad in his mechanical mind, that's what built the ditcher, but just figured out that thing so she wouldn't have to do this. And then when Jerry and I were married, I took one look at Minerva, my mother-in-law, out there by the side of the house scrubbing clothes, and I found out I was pregnant with Jerry, and we had been, the first year we were married, after they caught us in Missoula, and the cop called and said, we caught him, what do you want to do with him? He said, KL, oh, what a great guy. I said, tell him to come home and go to work. Oh, work, we did. And the next year then, of course, when I was 16, I was pregnant with Jerry. And I took one look at Minerva doing this out by the side of the house, and I said, I'm not going to wash clothes like that. So I went into Great Falls, 16 years old, to Duval Wallace. And I went into Mr. Duval, and I said, do you remember who I am? And he said, yeah, I think you're a Meyer. And I said, yeah, I'm Lorraine Meyer. I said, I married Jerry Molen, and I'm going to have a baby, and I'm not going to wash clothes on the board. What kind of a deal can I make for a washing machine? So they had a machine that you stepped on the little thing and started the motor, a little gas motor, you know, with a little putt-putt. And I think it was $120. And he said, I'll tell you what, he just thought it was hysterical. He told Dad later, I had the same kind of mind he did. He said, you can have it for $5 down and $5 a month. Well, we got paid $15 a month at the dairy. And didn't worry about food because we traded milk for all our groceries at Sisson's store there in Great Falls. So here they delivered that washing machine. No place to put it because we lived in a little house built like out of a boxcar because KL was working for the Great Northern. So there sat that washing machine, and I kept it covered up. And I would heat the water in the boiler, and then Jerry'd lift it out for me so he could wash it. And then we had cold water to rinse. Why, Minerva thought I was terrible, never heard of such a thing, blah, 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 blah. Within 2 weeks, she was over there with a load of clothes. I'm going to have Kenneth heat some water, and I want to use your washing machine today. Oh, pretty soon that poor old washing machine, Marge came up from Fairfield with, and instead of saying no, I was only 16. I didn't have brains enough to tell them because they thought I was terrible. Oh, I was a character. I remember the 30s, things were bad for Dad because all we kids, like Al and I talked about in later years, all we heard him talking about was, oh, got to keep the money together for the taxes. He had 1,000 acres of land. Part of it was his, and part of it was rented from the other farmers down there, and trying to keep the payments up, just the taxes. That's all they were trying to do. Oh, it was terrible. There wasn't any money. But to kids 10 and 12 years old, me a thing. I can remember when FDR got in, because my dad said, well, he talks a good talk. He said, I'm going to vote for, oh, my dad wouldn't vote with Democratic, but everybody voted for FDR that first year. He had that musical voice. And then he was in for 4 terms, so about that time they decided to make a law that they could only serve 2 terms, you know. Yeah, that's 8th grade. Boy, you didn't wear pants. Women didn't wear pants. We shocked them to death in Sims when we made what we called day pajamas when we were to school. That was the first pants we ever. Women, Mom said they were so dumb that women didn't wear pants and they had to wear shoes with socks in, and I had to wear silk hose to school because you had to keep your legs covered, and we put bibs on them and wore blouses with them. We put Miss Arnott, the teacher in the home ec room, just shook her head. She was so prim and proper, and she said, "Are all you girls making these?" Yep. We all made them, and Mr. Herschel James was the principal. He just smiled. If you want to do that, kids, fine. Just all he wanted us to do was get good grades. He didn't care what we wore. Great old guy. When we got older, when we went to Dad and a few of the men decided that when we went to high school, broke my heart, that Shota was too fast. There was too much drinking and that going on. So there were 11 of us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7 of us first. They hired a guy by the name of Kelly, Victor Kelly, and they got a great big old Dodge or Buick limousine or something, and we kids had to go to Sims to the high school in Sims. That's how come I met Jerry. I think Dad was always sorry he sent me to Sims. And the other kids all got to go to Shoto from our schools. And it just broke our hearts that they broke us up like that. But then 2 years later, Al comes along to go to high school, and they let him go to Shoto. And I said to Dad, I'll never forgive you for that. Of course, Dad and I didn't get along anyway, so. If you remember the valley at all, there was Sims, and then there was Fort Shaw, and then there was Sun River right there on the river where it goes into the, before it goes down to the Missouri. Oh, we used to have wonderful dances down there in that big Norwegian, they called them the Norway Halls of Norway because all the Norwegians, the Lutherans, built them. And we danced all night. Oh my gosh. That's where I got in trouble and ran away and married Grandpa. We had gone to a dance. The whole gang of it. There was 11 of us, I think. Bud Olson's younger brother, Norman, was with us. And Jerry and I and Rex and Oscar and Betty Couch and Isabel Travis. Anyway, all we wanted to do was dance. We were just crazy about the new dances coming into Charleston and all those, and just a little bit ahead of our time, so we were mimic them, you know. We all piled in that old Model T of Jerry's and went to this dance. Well, then, of course, the darn thing ran out of gas. And the dance, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, but there was no traffic on 89 in those days. In Montana, there wasn't a car an hour. And here we were, kids strung out all over there. And Betty Couch said, you can go home with me. And somebody, blah, blah, blah. Ruthie Molen said, you come home with me, La, and we'll sleep on the floor in the kitchen. So we did. I mean, we stretched all out. Everybody staying in everywhere. And Jerry's dad, K.L. Molen, was one of the finest men that ever lived. So he said, nobody ever had, there was a depression. Nobody had any money. He said, I'll get you kids home in the morning. We'll get the car, because we had put kerosene in it and ran out of kerosene, so then it wouldn't go anywhere. And I'll get the car together and take you all home. Well, about that time, Ruth and I are sleeping on the floor in the kitchen with a pillow. Here came my dad, my lovely father, banging on the door, and he said, is Lorraine here? And K.L. said, yeah, we're just going to get the car ready and take all these kids home. And Dad jerked me through the door, and he said, oh, I'll take this one. And he yadded all the way home. I said, Dad, the car broke down. You couldn't explain anything to my father. He knew everything. The minute he got home, he got that belt out again. I was used to that because I always just told Al, I took all the beatings for all of us. And when he got through, Mom finally walked in and said, that's enough, that's enough. I turned around and I said to him, you'll never hit me again. Oh, go on, long lady, blah, blah, blah. Well, in the morning, while they went to Great Falls to sell some pigs, I took off. I went to Vaughn and I told Jerry and Rex, and I said, don't come back. My dad's in a bad mood. He'll kill you and that. And Ralph said, well, why don't you guys just go get married and put a stop to it? Oh, that's a great idea. So that we all, Rex and Jerry and Oscar, who were inseparable, and I took off for Havre. But the nice little guy that were Les Woods worked for KL on the dairy. He said, I'll tell him you've gone to Helena. Okay, so he did. So Dad had the cops and everybody out looking for us. In Helena. We were in Havre, and Rex had a brother, Glenn, in Havre, who worked in the store up there. And he said, do you know a minister in this town? And he said, yeah. And he said, got to get these kids married. Naturally, got to get the kids married. In those days, that meant the girl was pregnant. He got a minister and got us married, and we went back off where we knew every hill and mountain road in Montana. You know, we were raised there. Went the back way into Missoula. And Oscar had a girlfriend in Missoula. He was going to college there, who had an apartment, and they were gone for 2 weeks, so we hid in there. And we were there 5 days. They'd go out and get enough. There was enough food in that in those days. You could, I don't know what we lived on, probably peanut butter and jelly. And they took the car out to mail a letter. And the cops got them, looking for that cop. Well, that car, we ran away. Nobody had any money, so Rex said, I'll take LeVar's car. He's got a new Ford convertible. So we piled in that convertible, but didn't have any license plates on it. So in order to Dean Hansen, who had the dairy, and he had a brand new dairy truck. They just borrowed one of the license plates off of his truck and put on this car, and away we went. Well, when they caught us, the sheriff just shook his head. His name was Thompson. He said, you guys have had everybody in the state looking for you. So he called KL. He said, well, we got him. We got him here in jail. What do you want to do with him? And KL thought a minute. He said, tell him to come home and go to work. He never said, no, why did you do this? Yeah, my dad would have screamed and yelled and everything, you know. KL never said a word. Tell him to come home and go to work. That's the kind of a man he, oh, we adored that man. Yeah, that's Sherry. That's the dress I paid $2.99 for. And gold ball from the church. We like to do the Charleston and stuff like that, so you had full skirts and stuff. Lots of Glenn Miller. Lots of Glenn Miller. And then when he went down during the war, we were all crushed, just crushed when he was lost. His String of Pearls and some of his music was so fabulous. Still is. You can listen to Glenn Miller music and it'll live on forever. We were just so full of it that we danced to everything. I can remember Dad, they used to have dances at the Sons of Norway Hall in Fairfield. And I'd want to go so bad. Dad, and there was a guy quite a bit older, Bernie Hatcher, and Dad would say, well, you can go with Bernie. Oh, I couldn't stand him. But I'd go because I was 15 and he was 19 or 20, and that way I got to go to the dances. But in those days, when the parents went to supervise, you had to have your first dance with your dad, and I'd dance with Dad, and he always wanted the blooms on the sage. 1, 2 this way, 2 that way, 2 this way, around the hall. And then I'd have my dance with my dad, and then you could dance all night with everybody. But they were there to supervise. When the bloom is on the sage, as pioneers used to sing it. That was a horrible picture, except I had great teeth. Dad was so death on teeth. He lost his so young. We were at the dentist every year. In those days, that once a year, we went to Dr. Crary and Shoto every year to make sure our teeth were just so. We didn't have orthodontists and stuff like that, but I didn't need them. Al could have used them. We were just at the end of the high 8th grades when the saddle shoes came in, things like that. We had a good time with those. But now I don't remember. We couldn't wear pants. Women didn't wear pants, you know. We didn't even wear pants in the field. Al and I had to drive stacker team in that. And women didn't wear pants out in the field. They wore long skirts and long stockings, and how stupid we were. But that's the way it was. Yeah, there's Jerry thinning beets. Oh yeah, that was KL's. Where were those beet fields? They had to be KL's, because that's about the time he said, come home and go to work. And did we go to work? Jerry thin beet. I tried it. Oh, it's the worst job. We finally ended up, I was driving the beet truck. Finally let me drive the truck to take it to the elevator and dump them. But, for the railroad car, but what a terrible job. You know, I don't remember after KL was killed and we lost the dairy. No, after KL was killed, had to be before, because after KL was killed and we lost the dairy, we lost everything. Minerva had her Great Northern Insurance, and she bought that house at I think it's still in the Molen name. It's 1123 8th Avenue North, 1223 8th Avenue North. We lived at 805 6th Avenue North. Sherry and Ken. That was on, and then there's Janine and the dog. I don't remember. I always wondered what ever happened to our animals when we left Montana. I suppose they all ended up on the farm. I know my cats did. Grandma said not to worry about the cats, that she'd take care of them. They'd probably been out swimming in the irrigation ditch. That's a good picture, yeah. Yeah, that was when Susie was little. Yeah, I always said I was going to have 8. I said I had 7. I just like kids. I used to babysit the extension agent's name was Thurber in Fairfield. And they had 3 little girls, and they needed a babysitter. And I'd ride Doris Shoquist and I would ride our bikes in all the way 3.5 miles on the gravelly old roads and babysit those little kids, and then ride home at night. Both of us scared to death of the dark, thanks to my father, years before. And a lot of times we took the bikes, a lot of times we took the horses. We had a couple of old plow horses. I had Bessie. on what horse was named, and we'd ride him in and tie him to the fence. Well, we didn't have bridles, but we had halters. Then we'd jump on the backs of those horses and head for home and just hang on. They were barn sour, and they'd head for home, see, at night, because then we were both scared to death of the dark. Nothing in the dark, but we didn't know it, especially out there in the Montana flatlands. I often wonder what happened to Doris. They said she died of cancer. Great family. The Shokas were so good to us. Swedes, but then they'll never find people like Swedes and Norwegians that are any better neighbors. Oh, the old house on the farm, yeah. We didn't last there very long because the government changed that for us. Thought we'd be there forever, and I just loved it. The resettlement program came in, and they allotted people, put your name in. I don't know just how it worked, but people that had been on WPA working for the government for $52 a month, their names were chosen. Some, I don't know how we ever got a chance to get one of them. 80 acres. That house was on it, but we were set because we didn't have to worry about farm equipment. Dad was on one end, Uncle Lloyd was over here, Uncle Lewis was here, and then they decided to. Then they finally got what the people have been telling them: 80 acres was not enough land to support a family. They had to have at least 120. So whose farm got divided? Ours was taken, and so it made Jerry mad, and we went into town, and Uncle Jess came to the rescue and went to work at Anaconda Copper. From Great Falls to California was wonderful. I was lucky I got on with 6 little kids, and Kay was a baby. She was about, what, 3 and a half, 4? 1946, and Bruce was born in 42, and she was born in 43, so she's about 3 and a half years old. And there was 2 nuns going from Great Falls to Butte. Well, I didn't have to worry about the baby. They took over with her, with Kay, and some soldier took the 3 oldest kids on the food car to eat. Oh, it was wonderful. We had a rough time because I could only get the two sleeping things. So I just curled up. There was room for the big kids on the bottom one and the one upstairs, and I just curled up around the little kids. It's all you could get after the war. The trains were loaded. Must have taken 2 nights. I had crawled up there 2 nights. And then we got to Vegas, and everything was taken off, the food car and everything. And we came on in, and we had to travel it at night because we came in early in the morning. Bruce or Jerry and Ken, I got them in Scouts for a while through the church when we moved to Great Falls, but then we went to California, and it was rough on the kids. Kay and Bruce had to go over to Charlie's. They went every day and read the funny books. And Kenny rode his bike back and forth to the liquor store. He had a job. Jerry joined the Marines and went off for 3 years. And then he came home and he had a little job down at the electric shop. Married Pat and that. And Jim called him one morning and said, "You want to go to work at the studio?" I can just hear him. And he said, "Union's open today. I can get you in today." So Jerry said, "Well, I guess so." The rest is history. So, you open the onion. You've never seen one before, and they start coming over, and you're across from Republic, and all you meet first is the cowboys, and Roy and Dale and all the kids, and Kay and Bruce went out and had their pictures taken with Roy with Trigger. I got a copy of that somewhere. They've all got them. I don't know. And right after we got down there, then they started square dancing, and we loved square dancing. Oh, our do-si-dos with Fenton Jones Calling was chosen to dance for the first square dance for television, and we went to Catalina to do it. Oh my! I've got the picture up in there of Jerry in his cowboy boots and me in my dress for Catalina. Kay made a shadow box of it from the do-si-dos, and that would have been 1947, 1948, 49, because we were divorced in 1950. Gee, I was skinny then. met Jim and married him almost, I don't know, knew him about 6 months. That was the first year we were married. And his eternal cigarette. And amazingly enough, in 1941, on the way to the Alamo, he threw him away. He thought it would be a good time. He'd smoked since he was, 10 or 11 years old. Oh, yeah, Republic Studios, horse truck. Go to Kanab and get a load of horses, and I'll meet you in Vegas and ride in with you. Oh, man, and then Jim flying down those hills. Oh, I guess you're supposed to be alive. My gosh, there's Betty and I, dear precious Betty. Yeah, she came down from Montana. She had, she'd gotten, was it hepatitis? From working she worked at the Marine Hospital in Seattle all those years, and she got the, what is it? Yeah. And so she had to rest. She went home to rest, and the folks brought her down to visit. And she never went back. She stayed with me there in the little house on Coldwater. And then she went to work at the hospital up on the hill and met Jerry. Never did like Wayne because he was so overbearing. And then to end 5 months on the Alamo with him, you know. Oh, I like Bob Mitchum. Do you know who one of my favorite singers was? Dean Martin. I always thought he had a wonderful voice. Something about Sinatra, I just didn't care much for him. We saw many years ago, before the Vegas got so big and fancy and all that, and they had the casinos down on the Strip, and it was little. You'd go in, and they'd have a little, like this, a little thing set up with a little band and 2 or 3 actors, and you'd sit out there in front. You could order drinks or not with your little chairs in the casinos. Many years ago, we saw Frank Sinatra. We saw all of them in those. Well, that's been 100 years ago. We used to come down. We came down for El Dorado days a couple of times when Roy and Dale were leading them, and I always loved Dean Martin. Oh, Dinah Shore was all right. She married George Montgomery. My gosh. He was a Lutz from Great Falls, for crying out loud. She married him. I remember the folks had come down when we were shooting Cimarron, and they knew the same senators in Great Falls. And he'd yell at them, "Hi, Montana." Here they'd drive in. They came, and they'd stay a week just so they could come out every day on location, and he and Dad could talk politics. Dad said, "Well, I know all his family in Great Falls." I said, "Yeah, you do. It's a big one." His real name was Lutz, but he was a great guy. He was one of the few. Another one that was always nice was Payne. Oh, probably Gone with the Wind is the first one I remember of any consequence. We used to go to, there used to be a Buddy Rogers, Nancy, what was the girl's name? Buddy Rogers and something Carroll. Nancy Carroll, was that her name? And we went to some of their movies in Great Falls, but I can't tell you what they were. And then Gone with the Wind came out in 1939. And we didn't have, we were so poor. And Frankie Harmon and I would save all our change. We went 3 times. And what did it cost us in those days? Well, of course, first they charged more because it was a special movie. Anyway, we dug up money enough to go 3 times and sit through Gone with the Wind. Oh, that was the first big one I remember. Oh, Humphrey Bogart and Casablanca. Oh, my favorite movie of all time. And we love the Perry Mason series. Gone with the Wind and Wings. Wings was the name of the movie with Buddy Rogers and Nancy Carroll, I think her name was. That was a famous Wings. It was a war story, and that's about all I can remember. But we didn't have the money or the time, and I don't know why we didn't pay much attention to movies till Gone with the Wind came out. And everybody was talking about it. And then Frankie and I couldn't leave it alone. We went 3 times. We lived there in Great Falls and went to Civic Center. They had at the end of Central, they had the theater in there at the time. First time Bruce and Julie took me to Hawaii, I was just petrified. I didn't want to go. It took me 3 times. 3 times we went over there. And Bruce would say, "Come on," Bruce would sit by me. And I was petrified. But I wanted to see Hawaii so bad. I loved Hawaii, so I wanted to go back. We went back 3 times, and then the next year in 1996, Pat came in and she said through a brochure they'd heard Jim talk Alaska. So the 1st of August in 1997, we went to Alaska. Oh, took that plane up. Oh, another plane ride. And all you could see going into Anchorage was little black things up through the clouds. And I made the mistake of saying to Jerry, what's that? And he said, those are mountaintops. What? He said, now just watch. And sure enough, the clouds opened up and we landed in Anchorage. Oh. Then we got on a ship. Now that was fun. That was fun, coming down that 7 days on that ship, you know. And of course, Jim was in hog heaven. He knew everybody from the bottom up. And then he even got up in the front, and the captain let him hang on to the controls of the ship and that. He knew everybody, and he knew where every buffet, there were 7 floors or 14 floors, and he'd been to every donut buffet on the whole ship. He knew where all the best food was. He had a ball. Probably Eisenhower. After FDR, probably Eisenhower. Very calm, he just kept everybody, you were just calm because Ike was calm. I mean, Sandy Koufax and as long as they're a baseball player, I like them all. But my favorite ones, I guess Sandy was my favorite. I like Don Drysdale and some of the older ones that stayed with one team for a while so you knew who they were. I used to love to hear Harry Carey call for the Cubs years ago. That's been a lot of years ago. But now you don't know who's on what team, because if they got a few extra million, they'll sell them to somebody else for somebody else, and you turn on the a game, and oh, there's John. He used to be with the Cards. Or it just frustrates me. I like the old days when Steve Garvey was on first, and Say was on third. One of the people that had the most influence on my life was your great-grandfather, K.L. Molen. I think he was, and even my dad, who was very much against Mormons, said that's one of the finest men that ever lived. He's so honest. And every time I think of something, I think of us running away and getting married and Dad screaming and all the cops looking for us and everything, and the cops caught us, and KL said, oh, well, tell him to come home and go to work. Oh, I adored that man. Of course, so did a lot of other people. Oh, just be yourself and follow your dream and work hard. Don't let somebody else do for it. If you want something, you got to get in and dig for it. You got to work for it. Most of them that want something hard enough will get in and work for it. It's not be given to you unless you're born a Rockefeller, one of them. Without your family, you're nothing. You haven't got anything to show for life if you haven't got a family. And look at the grandkids, what a lot of the grandkids have accomplished, and look what the great-grandkids coming up. It's interesting to live long enough to see all that. It really is. Makes you feel good.